Hi.
Hey everyone, how are you?
Good.
Good.
All right, so we've got a couple of minutes here, but once we hit 5:30, I guess I'll start the bare bones introductions to what we're up to, and then after that, Laura, I'll cue you when I need you to start the presentation up, and we'll just go through there from there as planned. And all of you who are panelists for this, which is everybody in that top bar there, if you have the same view I do, if you're not actually on, please make sure you're muted just so we cut down the amount of feedback and background noise we get. We've had some weird little feedback artifacts in the past when I've had a couple of microphones open. Hey, Carolyn? Carolyn, are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. I just now heard from Leah that she's going to attend for at least part of the meeting. So if she's on your attendee list, could you bump her up to a
Yep,
panelist?
sure will.
Thank you.
Whoops, wrong person. Do by mistake. Okay. All right, we're recording, so you can get started anytime, Scott.
All right, thank you. All right, so Carolyn, am I on to everybody now?
Yes, you are.
Great, thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to this community meeting about Special Use Permit 2020-13, the Weavertree Hall Special Events Permit. You see we have quite a few attendees. So before we get started, I would like to just give you a very brief rundown of how the meeting is going to go, and then we'll dive into it. I will do a brief, introduce myself and do a brief introduction of the county processes, and the applicants will take some time to describe their project and provide you all with more information. And at the end, we'll do a Q&A session for anybody who would like to raise their hand, virtually speaking, and put questions forward or requests for information. So my name is Scott Clark. I'm a senior planner with the Albemarle County Community Development Department. I work largely on rural area issues, and I'm the review coordinator for this special use permit. And I'm going to start off, and Lori, if you could go ahead and bring up that PowerPoint. I want to start off by doing a brief introduction to the county's special use permit review processes before we get to the applicant's description of their project. Take just a moment here. All right, so again, this is the community meeting for SB 2020-13 Weavertree Hall Special Events. What I want to start off with, if I can get the slides to page through. Oops. That's not what I wanted. Apologize for the technical difficulties. Alrighty then, so the purpose of our community meeting tonight is to share information about the proposed project, about the development review process, and about the relevant policies that are considered during this review. We also want to get public input. We'll have a chance at the end of the meeting for you all to ask questions and provide feedback. So a quick review of the process overall. How does development happen in Albemarle County? A special use permit is a legislative act by the Board of Supervisors to approve a land use in a particular location. So this is just a quick overall view of the process from beginning to end, from starting at the application point all the way to the end of building permits and zoning clearances and getting a use started and operating if it is approved. So the portion of this process we are in is here. We are in the legislative review process, which means we are assembling information, reviewing the application to get ready for consideration of the application by the Planning Commission and finally the Board of Supervisors for a decision on if and how to approve the use and its limits of operations. So we are I would say early middle of that legislative review process, which is all about whether or not the use should be permitted. Those later stages you see are about the actual development of a use that is approved, but we're not there yet. Okay, all special use permits are reviewed in accord with the comprehensive plan for the county. What is the comprehensive plan? It's a guiding land use document that establishes a 20-year vision for the county. It tells us what kinds of uses we want and what parts of the county and what's most beneficial to the community and our goals for the future. So I won't read through all of these, but just skim through it. This property and proposal are located in the rural areas. And you can see here the major overarching goal for the rural areas in the comprehensive plan. Rural area will have thriving farms and forests, traditional crossroads communities, protected scenic areas, historic sites, and preserved natural resources. And there's several objectives below that, each of which has its own list of many strategies, all of which are intended to reach that overarching goal. So any special use permit in its area of the county should be appropriate under the plan goal for that area. So any special use permit in the rural areas should be appropriate under this goal that the county has adopted for rural land. Things like strong agricultural and forestal economy, preserving natural resources, protecting historical, archaeological, and cultural resources, and you can see the rest of the list. So what is zoning? If the comprehensive plan is a goal-setting document, zoning is the set of regulations that tells you what you can actually do, where you can build, what you can build, what each zoning district allows in terms of uses on the land. Zoning ordinance tells you what can be done by right today. It also tells you what uses are only permitted by special use permit, which again is that legislative approval by the Board of Supervisors. So that's the kind of process that we're talking about today. This specific proposal is for the special events use category. There are lots of different kinds of events permitted in the rural areas zoning district. Different types of events have different by right uses and different special use permit requirements. You all may have heard of farm events or agricultural operation events that include things like by right agritourism, by right events under 200 people, or farm winery events. Of course, many people have heard about in our area that again have a lot of by right tourism and visiting uses, but require a special use permit for over 200 attendees. However, the category we're talking about tonight is a little different. Unlike agricultural operations or a farm winery that require some specific farm use to be going on, the special events use is a use category that is available throughout the rural areas of the county. It always requires a special use permit. Doesn't necessarily require that there be an agricultural operation. The supplemental regulations for this use that set what our expectations are for how often and how big they can be, saying no more than 24 times per year and no more than 150 attendees per event. Events are typically one day, they can be up to 3, and any request to have more uses, more events per year, or more people per event requires a special exception to vary from those regulations that set those limits out. So again, we're talking about a special events, special use permit, rather than agricultural or winery type events. So special use and rezoning applications. Apologies for that. How does the review process work? In the end, Board of Supervisors approval is required for any special use permit use. This is a legislative review process. The application is reviewed first by county staff and other agencies that might be applicable, like VDOT, the Water and Sewer Authority, others depending on the location of the use. After the staff review, which goes in an iterative process back and forth with the applicants to develop what the application actually asks for, there are 2 public hearings, one with the Planning Commission and one with the Board of Supervisors. The Planning Commission's job is to advise the Board of Supervisors on land use issues, and the Board of Supervisors, being the elected officials, are the ones who are empowered to approve or deny a legislative request. So for all special use permits, not just special events, but any special use permit in any zoning district, we have some standard factors for consideration. So these will be what you eventually see in staff's report to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. These factors are: 1, no substantial detriment. So that's how the use would affect adjacent properties and nearby properties. 2, that the character of the nearby area is unchanged. So this again is about how the impact, or how the use impacts nearby areas. 3, harmony, whether it's in harmony with the purposes and intent of the chapter, which in this case is the zoning ordinance overall, and also the purposes of the rural areas chapter of the zoning ordinance. And finally, consistency with the comprehensive plan, whether the proposed use is consistent with those policies I talked about earlier about the county's vision for the future of the rural areas. Just a moment, I'm having. Okay, so that's the overview of the review process for special use permits in general and for this special events proposal specifically. The next piece of the presentation we have will be information from the applicants describing their proposal and providing more information for everyone. When we're done with that, we will have that Q&A session, and we'll just have people raise their hands, and then Carolyn Schaefer, our recording secretary, will identify speakers one by one so they can have their opportunity to ask questions or provide feedback. So that's the end of my presentation on the county process. Of course, you're welcome to ask questions about that later for more clarifications. For the moment, I will now pass control back to Ms. Lori Schweller, representing the applicants for their portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Scott. This is Lori Schweller. I am an attorney with Williams Mullen representing the applicant. Let me introduce to you our team. The property owner is Helmasco LLC, and the principal is Scott Kelly. The applicant is Helmasco Operations, and the primary proponent here is Nancy Sanford. And just to be clear on the timeline, Scott purchased the property in December 2019. He and Nancy used the property as their home, and Nancy has championed this project. So Scott and Nancy are a team, and both are on this meeting with us tonight. Also on the meeting with us tonight is Kelsey Schlein, who's an engineer with Shimp Engineering, and Bill Yoder with Ascentech, who is a sound engineer. The property is south of Kingsway, south of Plank Road, with access off Kingsway. This property is about 145 acres and is zoned rural area. The entire property, and this is the home Bellevue, is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and is under conservation easement with the Virginia Outdoors Foundation. This map, this aerial, is showing you some photographs that we took and have submitted to the Department of Historic Resources so they could update their files on this property. There are 16 barns, stables, and other buildings, and we'll be talking in detail about some in this area here, primarily the former riding ring operated by the prior owner of the property for horse events, and these buildings that surround the riding ring. Our proposal is for special events, which, as Scott explained, is permitted by a legislative action of the county's Board of Supervisors. It's permitted by special use permit in the rural areas where there's an existing by right use, such as a residence or an agriculture. This particular category of use was developed prior to the winery, brewery, and distillery regulations for the enjoyment and support of historic properties. And it is in compliance with the comprehensive plan because it protects and preserves historic resources and rural landscapes. Unlike wineries, which may have events for up to 200 guests by right, this special events use requires an SUP and permits 150 guests unless increased by special exception. More specifically, the ordinance permits 24 events per year, and again, 150 guests without a special exception. No kitchens or restaurants are permitted. What we are requesting is only 18 events per year with 150 guests maximum for 14 of those, and a maximum of 350 guests for 4 of those events. So these are maximum numbers. Again, an overview of the property showing you topography and surrounding property owners. You can see that there is a stream flowing through the property, and we'll be respecting stream buffers as we plan the project site. And this is a zoomed in look at the concept plan. These hatched areas are the 2 outdoor event spaces. This northern space is a little bit larger, smaller space to the south, and right in the middle is the former riding ring, which is the primary event structure. So this is the riding ring here, large major event space here, and then another barn here that we'll be talking about a little bit. There's also a small event space here and a small barn here. So this is the former riding ring. This is the primary space where events would take place. This particular building, unlike the other structures, the other outbuildings, has a gray siding, and the applicants would like to modify the siding to bring it into line with all the other structures, the nice dark green exterior and red roof. So the proposal is to change only the exterior of that building, not the footprint, but to change the exterior to be in line with the existing structures as an adaptive reuse project. So you can see this space is the same as this space, and I'll show you once again, it is this space between the primary event structure and this barn here.
Lori, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've gotten a comment that people are having a hard time seeing where your cursor is. So if you could maybe just describe which photo you're talking about or which point on the map.
Okay.
Apparently the cursor is having a hard time showing up.
Okay, I'll do a better job with descriptions. So we're now looking at, in the top left-hand corner, The horse barn is the building to the north of the event space. So that paved area there is the current location of the proposed outdoor event space, and immediately behind you is the riding ring. The other photos on this slide are stables that run along the west side of the event space. And these will only be improved to make them more structurally sound. Nothing about the exterior of these buildings will change. The only exterior changes that are proposed are to the riding ring itself to bring it more in line with these historically contributing structures. This slide is showing you proposed access from Plank Road over Kingsway Road. Kingsway Road is a private road that serves the property and surrounding lots to the south. The applicant is proposing valet parking for all guests, so only valets will enter into the parking area. And you can see that the circulation moves to the south and across to parking. The blue rectangle is showing the currently proposed location of parking. For guests, for those 4 events that might have guest numbers over 150, a bus shuttle would be required for any guests over 150. And there wouldn't be any use of access from Dick Woods Road except as an emergency vehicle access. This is a parking cross-section, and this slide is showing you the parking area to your right, and then the closest residence to your left. And as you can see, between the parking area and the closest homes, there is a large tree buffer, and there is a distance of 447 feet between the edge of the parking lot and the closest residence. There's also a difference in grade of about 50 feet from the parking area to the residences. And that will help to not only buffer the parking from nearby homes, but to make sure that there are no headlights or noise coming from the parking area towards those homes. The applicant has been in contact and discussions with the Virginia Outdoors Foundation since our pre-application meeting in May. VOF has confirmed that the conservation easement does permit the proposed use and that the existing riding ring may be adaptively reused for commercial event use. A new commercial structure could not be built on this property, but that's not what we're proposing. The applicant is going to work with VOF to review and approve any proposed changes to the exterior of the riding ring building. And VOF may visit the site to document the current condition of the buildings and gauge proposed impact to protected conservation values as it provides its input. VOF will also review any proposed parking areas. The applicant has also been in discussions with the Virginia Department of Historic Resources, which also provided a comment letter to us. The riding ring, according to DHR, is considered a non-contributing structure to the complex, but it is compatible in massing and scale to the other barns and stables. So DHR appreciates that we're keeping the massing and scale intact and not changing the footprint of the building. In terms of adaptive reuse, if the stables are changed at all, the DHR has recommended that we follow the Secretary of Interior's guidelines for rehabilitation. DHR recommended that no buildings had been proposed for removal, except there was consideration of removing the horse barn in front of the riding ring to open up the views. But DHR discussed with us that this type of barn is disappearing from the Virginian landscape and recommending not removing it, and it will not be removed. So the applicant intends to work with DHR throughout the design and preservation process. Now I'd like to shift to music and sound considerations. Ascentech has modeled sound level predictions for the following. a distributed house system around the outdoor areas for ambient music. This would be music that you're hearing as you mingle for cocktails prior to an event. Crowd voices, and Asantec has looked at crowds of 150 and crowds of 350. Dance floor with outdoor dance music and variations of all the combinations of the above. So just as background, the Albemarle County zoning ordinance permits the following noise ordinance maximum decibels at the property boundary. During the daytime, which is 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., it permits 60 decibels at the property line, which is similar to conversation at 3 feet away. At nighttime, which is 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., the ordinance permits 55 decibels. And what I'm looking here on the right-hand side of your screen is OSHA typical sound levels, for those of you who aren't seeing that. So the project will meet all nighttime noise ordinance levels. Those are the most strict levels. Regardless of that, there will be no outdoor amplified music during the nighttime hours. So Asantec evaluated sound not just at the property boundaries, but also at homes within 1,000 feet of the event building, so that we could look at any potential impact on surrounding neighbors. And the finding from Asantec was that all sound will meet the county's nighttime noise ordinance levels at all property lines and at the closest homes. The report is long and has lots of figures which demonstrate these variations, but I'd like to boil it down to just a few for you for this particular presentation. So this particular modeling shows you distributed music in this noise contour map. And so once again, right in the center is the event area. And then you can see the various decibels that are produced by distributed noise. You can also see the property line in black. And what this is showing you is that up to 40 decibels is the maximum sound level at the property line and closest homes from distributed music. When you add a crowd to that, it doesn't change too much. You still see a maximum, you see levels at 30 to 45 decibels. That's comparable to, this is also a comparable noise level exhibit, and this is from the FAA. And you can see that 40 to 45 decibels is considered quiet, rural, outdoor sound levels. And if you add to the distributed music and 150 attendees dance floor music, you can see that we have about 50 to 55 decibels beyond the property boundary line, at the property boundary line. And then finally, if you add the maximum number of attendees, which is 350, all sorts of music, and we're talking about outdoor amplified music, once again, levels do not exceed 55 decibels at the property line and closest residences. And again, looking at the comparable noise levels, you can see that's comparable somewhere between quiet rural and quiet urban on the FAA comparative noise level exhibit. On the OSHA exhibit, it's somewhere around between urban residents and conversation 3 feet away. The applicant will propose a sound management plan, and these are some of the points of that plan, which is still being worked on based on the input that we receive from staff and from the community. First, the applicant will have a house sound system to maintain control over the sound levels. That means when a vendor comes in to put on an event, it will not have its own music system. There will be a house sound system so that it can be controlled at the site. Speaker placement and distribution. If you looked at the initial submitted plan, you'll note that we have removed 4 speakers from the initial plan, and that may change before our resubmission. Advance notification of upcoming events to neighbors, and a contact person and direct telephone number for the manager of the event during the events. Sound
Lori,
level, yes.
Lori, I'm sorry to interrupt you once again.
Of course,
We just have an issue we need to address before you finish your presentation.
sure.
Excuse me. For all the attendees who have raised questions in the chat, for everyone, the issue we've had is that we have had more attendees trying to get into the meeting than we have capacity for in our Zoom license. Our Zoom license is limited to 100 participants, and we've been varying between 95 and 100 participants at any given time. So we are aware of the issue. We apologize that we are not at the moment able to increase the size of our license. So for anyone who is in the meeting, you're fine. For anyone who can't get in, we'll try to let them know, and you all can pass the word that public input will still be available through emailing to me through the county information link on the website. And there's a public input link that I will post in just a moment so that everyone who isn't able to get in will still be able to give feedback. I'll work with the applicants to find a way to get information out that is not, that's visible in this meeting, but that isn't available to the people who can't log in. And of course, the application materials are available on the county website. So I will provide more information on that as soon as I can. So well, we are aware of the capacity limit issue. We will address that as best we can, and we'll try to make sure that we get the information that's needed out to everyone who unfortunately is not able to get in due to the license limit. And I think we have a few people dropping out, and maybe at the end, well, if people have a chance to say their questions or ask for their input and then drop out to let someone else in, that would let someone speak, but unfortunately, of course, that doesn't help them to see the presentation itself. So we'll try to find a way to post that. So I will hand it back to Ms. Schweller now to finish the
Can I just put in
presentation.
here, the presentation will be part of the recording that I will post tomorrow. It should be on the county website, probably by 8:30 tomorrow morning. The link will be on the county calendar. Go back to tonight's meeting and click on recording, and it will take you to our YouTube page where the recording will be.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn.
Sorry, Lori, go ahead.
Okay, thank you both. So I was just mentioning some of the likely factors that we'll set out in our sound management plan. The last two are, there will be a way to either monitor the sound system or have automatic limitations to the sound system to make sure that the sound keeps within desired limits. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, outdoor amplified music will end no later than 10 p.m. And that's every night, not just some nights, but every night. All events, of course, are going to end at 12 a.m. And just briefly, the summary of our timeline to date following our pre-application meeting. The applicant did discuss the proposed project with both Virginia Outdoors Foundation and the Department of Historic Resources to get early input, and those discussions are ongoing. In early July, the applicant reached out informally to neighbors to start discussions to hear input from the neighbors, and had some telephone calls and other discussions with neighbors so that we could get some feedback to inform our application, which was submitted on September 21st. And we received Community Development Department staff comments on November 6th. Staff visited the site on November 20th, and we had a small on-site community meeting, which was limited owing to COVID-19 limitations on November 21st. Today, of course, is the county's community meeting. And at this point, our current plan is to resubmit our application, having received further comment from the community and from staff, to resubmit by the December 21st deadline. This is Scott's slide, but Scott, I'll just note to the attendees that there are some other committees to be considered: the Agricultural Forestal District Advisory Committee, because there's an agricultural forestal district nearby, and then of course Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors would follow that sometime next year. That's the end of our formal presentation, so I'll turn it back to Carolyn and Scott so that we can open up for question and answer.
Okay, thank you. And we will go ahead on into the Q&A portion now. Thank you all for your patience with our difficulties with the license and all that. I apologize for having to interrupt the presentation a couple of times. We do have quite a few attendees here. Those of you who want to ask questions can use the raise hand button, which should be in the
All right, I have 4 people right now that have their hand raised. Do you want me to read questions or would you like them to go first?
Let's just have the people who have raised their hands go first, please. For those of you who have typed questions into the chat, it would, if it's possible, it would be better if we could have you raise your hand and say your questions. We'll try to get to everybody, but let's just have everybody raise their hands, and then Carolyn will call you one at a time to ask your questions. And those can be questions for the applicants about the project, or it can be questions for me about the county processes. Either one is fine.
Okay, and don't put your hand down. Once you raise your hand, it puts you in the queue in the right order. So just be patient and I will go to you one right after the other. When I give you the option to speak, I will need you to state your name and your address. You will have 3 minutes to speak. At the end of 3 minutes, I'm going to make a hard stop and you'll have to stop talking at that point. If you put your hand up and then take it down, that's going to bounce you out of the queue for questions. The first one I have is Barbara Studholtz. And if you can please unmute, and you have 3 minutes. Don't forget to state your name and your address, and then you have 3 minutes to speak, starting now.
Yes, hi, thank you very much. I'm Barbara Stadholm. I live at 7150 Plank Road, and have been here in the Batesville area lived here for 25 years, and my family has lived in Batesville for the past 50 years. I actually have comments rather than questions, and in the interest of time with so many people here, I'm going to just whittle it down to one question, and that is, what is the best way to send my more extensive comments to the right people? I know I have your email, Scott, but can I send it elsewhere as well, and by what date?
Excuse me, just to answer that for everyone who might have that question, it's better to send it directly to me at sclark@albemarle.org, and I will get the comments to everyone who needs to see them, but just easier if it can all come through me. We had asked people to try to reply by December 15th, if not earlier, just so that any suggestions can be incorporated into the applicant's next submittal, but of course that is not an end to the public input overall. You can still make your voices heard all the way through the end of the process with the Board of Supervisors public hearing.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. And just as a follow-up to that, would you prefer if we have multiple topics for us to do multiple emails, or just one email with our multiple topics in it?
One per person would be great. Make it as long or as short as you want.
Terrific. And I will ask one question, and that is that I don't see anywhere that outdoor lighting has been addressed. And, light pollution is also a nuisance for neighbors' enjoyment of property. And since many of these events are going to be taking place at night, I imagine there will be outdoor lighting all around the event, and in the parking area and at Kingsway to allow event guests to depart safely. And that would have a profound negative impact on our rural environment where many of us enjoy the darkness of the night sky. And I will mute myself and
Thank you. You're perfect timing.
Hi, Ms. Studholm. Thank you for your question. Lighting will certainly be considered.
Did we lose Lori?
Hold on. Oops. Lori, you did.
Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry about that. I lost connection. Lighting will be included in the site planning portion. At this point, this is more of a concept plan, but lighting won't be required in the parking lot area. There will be lighting in the event area. And Kelsey, would you like to speak to a little bit more detail about what we're thinking in that area at this point?
Certainly. Sorry, I just had to unmute myself there. Hey, everyone. As Lori introduced me, I'm Kelsey. I'm a planner with Shimp Engineering. So as we're still working through just as we're kind of defining the spaces and how people will utilize the event area. Still working through the exact placement of lighting. But it's, as Lori said, certainly something that we'll work through as we get further along in the design process. Consideration of full cutoff fixtures where appropriate, consideration of limiting lumens in certain areas to protect the dark skies in that area.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Certainly.
Okay, next we have Rory Carpenter. Rory, please state your name and address. You have 3 minutes to starting now.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. Yes, my name is Rory Carpenter, and I live at 1081 Kingsway Road. I guess I would like to approach this from the perspective that I have, which is very personal. My property directly abuts the venue site, it's adjacent to Weavertree Hall Farm and across from the site, only separated by Kingsway Road, which is a private one-lane road, which is has been developed and supported by the neighbors and belongs to everyone that has property on the road, not just to the farm. My wife and I built our house here 30 years ago because of the beauty and tranquility of the area. We raised our 2 children here and we love it here. What we love most, again, is the fact that it's rural and it's one of the most beautiful spots in Albemarle County. We're very concerned about the impact that 150 to 350 people will have upon our tranquility and the tranquility of the Batesville area. For instance, it's 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, and there are 150 to 300 cars, buses, whatever, driving past my house, which is about 50 yards away from Kingsway Road. The significant impact that will have on me will be amazing. And then beyond that, the noise level, I can hear where the venue is supposed to be. I can hear people talking. We live in a bowl where noise reverberates. I can hear people talking. So loud music is going to be a significant impact on me and on this neighborhood. I think that's what makes this a little unusual. We are a neighborhood here and we surround this venue. We abut it. We're very close to it. I don't think many other venues, if any, have that type of a situation. So the impact on the neighborhood, myself, and the greater Batesville community is major. The road, Plank Road, people who've been inebriated driving at night is going to be dangerous. The lights that was talked about, the water that will be used, 10 toilets flushing on a regular basis. We have a limited water here. That's going to be an impact. So I can go on, but I know my 3 minutes are coming up. Very negative impact from my perspective. So I thank you all very much for the presentation.
Thank you. Next,
Cheryl?
yes.
would it be okay if we go ahead and make one quick response to one of Rory's comments?
Sure.
We did hear some concerns about water supply and the water table at our small community meeting, and I'd like to invite Kelsey to provide some information in response to that. I know it is of concern to some of the neighbors.
Certainly. So for this project, we completed a preliminary soil study to evaluate the adequacy of the soil to serve an on-site sewage, so on-site drain field. And in evaluating that study, when we're looking at the capacity of the soils to handle the sewage, we're also, in turn, considering how much water use is going to be on the property, since that will be going into the future sewage disposal system. So our soils, the anticipated water usage is informed by Virginia sewage disposal handling regulations. Our soils consultant estimated the amount of water usage for a daily event. And just to provide a comparison, at 18 events a year with an estimated 1,800 gallons per day of water usage, that comes out to approximately 88 gallons per day. And when we're designing for sewage handling systems, we're designing for 75 gallons per day per person. So this proposed use on an annual basis with water usage limited to 18 events per year is about 10 gallons or so more per day than an individual. So then, a kid moving home from college and living with you for a year or something. Additionally, this is an 145 acre property with 145 acres contributing to the groundwater recharge on this. But we're definitely listening and hear you with the water concerns, and we'll continue working with VDH as we're working through the permitting process and with our soils consultants on that.
Okay,
Thanks,
next we have Chris O'Brien. Chris, please state your name, unmute yourself, state your name and address. You have 3
Hi,
minutes.
this is Mary Ann O'Brien. My husband Chris is here too. We live at 6818 Batesville Road. We are extremely concerned that this usage is not beneficial to the rural nature of the place that we live. We've lived here for 16 years. We love the quiet. We love the calm. We're concerned about the traffic exiting the site after drinking and having their parties. People who probably don't know backcountry roads, exiting onto a road with no street lights, and then trying to drive it through our village. Okay? We live here. We're worried about the light pollution. We're worried about the water level, frankly, and what we just heard didn't make us feel any safer about it. Houses around us ended up with their wells going dry 10 years ago in a drought. We don't need somebody who's going to be taking huge amounts of water out. We just don't see any upside for Batesville or the community. We see only negatives. We see people who are going to try and get rich having events. We don't see people who actually care about the community. And that's all we have to say. Thank you.
All right, the next one is Stephen Yowell. Stephen, please unmute yourself, state your name and address, and your 3 minutes starts now.
Good, thank you. This is Stephen Yowell. Do you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, you're fine.
Thank you. My address currently is 7585 Jarman Gap Road and, Rockfish Gap Turnpike. But I'm here representing another organization in Greenwood, as well as my personal comments. In 2011, the Greenwood Afton Rural Historic District was created. It composes a little over 16,000 acres, roughly from Yancey Mills to the top of Afton Mountain and about 3 to 4 miles on either side of Route 250. That designation is an honorary thing, and I understand that. In 2011, that they were given that designation. I've been a resident in Greenwood since 2000, in the Crozet area for over 20 years, in the Charlottesville area my whole life. The Greenwood area is a special area in Albemarle County. Thus, it earned that designation, becoming a rural historic district. It only comprises 3% of Albemarle County. It's 16,000 acres plus a few compared to the 465,000 acres in Albemarle County. It is rural, and it is one of the best preserved small areas in our county. There are 10 primary estates here, and until this application, 9 of the 10 owners are residents. I represent the Greenwood Foundation now. The original organization was the Western Albemarle Association, and we took it over in April of 19 and are currently doing business as the Greenwood Foundation. And it is the strong recommendation of the Greenwood Foundation that this application be denied. It is not in keeping with the rural character of the neighborhood. All the items that people have listed can go on and on. But I spent a good bit of time with the narrative report in the special use permit. And there are 2 bottom lines. They are both on the first page. First, we don't know who the owner of this property is. One paragraph says the owner of the property, Hills Musco LLC. And then 2 paragraphs down, it says the owner formed Hill Musco Operations. So who is the owner? It's a technical point, but I'm sure the county will get technical when they resolve this issue. But the bottom line on page 1 states what the objective of this group. The objective is to operate the agricultural business. There is no
Sorry, sir,
agricultural.
your time is up. Next, I have Donna. Please state your full name and address or an association that you're representing. Your 3 minutes starts now. Be sure to unmute yourself.
Hi, could I give my time to the previous gentleman to let him finish?
I've never had that question before. I'm not really sure. I mean, everybody has 3 minutes to speak. I don't think we can do that.
Yeah, let's have everybody do their own comments. Mr. Yao,
Why not?
you can contact me with the rest
He
of his.
represents multiple people.
We need to give everybody a chance to speak. So.
Right, but I'm
let's,
donating my 3 minutes.
I think so.
Mr. Yao, can you summarize the ends of your comments in, say, 30 seconds or a minute?
Let me get him back up here. Hold on.
My main concern is to give a chance to everybody.
Right.
Hello, Scott.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you now. So if you could.
Okay,
go ahead
thank
and
you.
finish,
I
that'd be
appreciate
great.
that.
Shoot. Hold on. I'm sorry, y'all. Try this again. Okay, Mr. Yao, you have 2 minutes.
All right, thank you. My mute button came back up. Do you still
That's
hear
my
me
fault.
okay?
I'm sorry. Yes, we can hear you now. Sorry.
Thank you. I was just going to state that The length and depth of this special use permit is overkill for what is trying to be achieved. The bottom line is, in my opinion, and many others who I've spoken with about this is not an application for a special use permit. This is an application for a business license. The very bottom paragraph on page 1 says, to operate the agricultural business, there is no agricultural business at Weavertree Hall, and to operate a commercial venue for parties, weddings, and other social events. This is not in keeping with the character of Greenwood. It's the only one of 10 estates that would have this, and it would establish a dangerous precedent for the county to move forward with this. Thank you very much.
All right, the next person is Austin Mill. Austin, please state your name and address or the group you're representing. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Thank you so much. My name is Austin Mill, and I live to Ortman Road at Casa Maria, and the owner of this. We are on a major, and I appreciate the presentation. We are on a major artery, Ortman Road, which leads into Plank Road, which ultimately leads to Weavertree Hall. Ortman Road is off of Route 250. It is less than 2 miles from an Interstate 64 exit. My question is, what is being done to address drunk driving, inebriation post-events? We have had 3 crashes here on Ortman Road in the past year. There have been many over the years, and the historic stone walls have been crashed into.
Austin, you're breaking up really bad. If there's
Most of
any
those
way,
accidents have been caused by, and with the normal traffic, which is Ortman Road. That I mean now.
yeah, it's better, but you're breaking up really bad.
I apologize. The main concern that we have, and the question we would have, is what is being done to address drunk driving on Ortman Road. We live on a major artery that leads to Plank. I think that needs to be addressed. This is a rural historic district. We do not need this to be turned into an events district. I think the precedent, as Mr. Yao stated, was not good. One final question that we actually have, that my partner and I both have, is what does this actually do to benefit the neighborhood, to benefit our community? I would love to know what the benefits the owners of the proposed plan would like to offer to those that live here full time. I've been here for 3 years now, and have come to also value the lack of noise, the lack of lighting problems, and certainly come to value the quietude on our roads. This just sets a terrible precedent, and we hope that drunk driving could be addressed. We also hope that traffic issues could be addressed, speeding, and I pity the poor people that live in the vicinity, and certainly in Batesville. If the events go till midnight, can you imagine what that actually means? And I think that means up until 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., people finally leaving and clearing out, including those operating the events. My partner also has something to say as well.
And sorry, I'm Spencer Gervasoni, Austin Mills partner here at 302 Ortman Road. And I just kind of wanted to reiterate those concerns, but also just to say that, I mean, this presentation was very thorough. I worked in Manhattan in creative advertising for a decade, and we just moved here a couple years ago. So I'm very well-versed in what it takes to make a good presentation, but I just did want to reiterate that a previous commenter said that I think this presentation sorely lacked, which is that what is the benefit of this to the community? I think, objectively speaking, everything spelled out as a drawback, and we've seen how this can be rationalized within the code of law. But I think the burden
Mr. Mill, your time is up. Your time is up now. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And Carolyn, just before we go on, I'd like to just remind everyone, you do have 3 minutes. Please try to watch the clock a little bit. We just want to make sure that everybody gets a fair chance to speak, and there are a lot of people waiting. So we can't extend time or share or trade time. It's going to get too complicated and we'll lose track of what's going on. So please just try to stick to your 3 minutes. Thank you.
I just want to interject in response to the comments and questions from Mr. Mill and Mr. Jervis that Scott and Nancy own this property and this is their home, and they would like to preserve and protect all of the resources on this property and enjoy it and to share it with others. And that's the purpose of this application, is to share the beauty of this property and the view sheds from this property. And it's their property to do so. And so we are fully complying with all of the county's requirements. We have taken every opportunity to reach out to the community, even before the application submission, to explain what's going on and to start accepting your comments and questions so we could incorporate those into our application. But in terms of the roadways, the public roadways, we submit our application and we work with VDOT and we work with the county's transportation planner, and we make sure that we do everything that's necessary according to the regulations of the state and local government. Beyond that, we don't have control over drunk drivers in the county. And there are a lot of venues in the area, in the immediate vicinity, in fact. So this is not setting a precedent, but just to say there is a limit to what a property owner can do in terms of these things off-site.
All right, next I have Carrie Brown. Carrie, please unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes to speak. State your name, address, and if you're representing a group, that as well.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I live on 1141 Kingsway Road and abut this property. And I would like to understand how this is not substantially detrimental to our neighbors, how it's in keeping with the neighbor and nearby area, how it keeps in harmony with the rural environment, and why this is consistent with the comprehensive plan of the rural environment. Thank you.
Sure, I'll take a stab at responding to some of those. Scott had a slide that showed all of those considerations that the Planning Commission will review, and then following its recommendation to the board, that the Board of Supervisors will review. We are crafting this application to ensure that this property remains preserved for the future. This historic property remains preserved, and that these beautiful rural view sheds protected by the Virginia Outdoors Foundation conservation easement remain preserved and protected. And those are all tenets of the comprehensive plan for the rural areas. In terms of the impact on the neighborhood and abutting properties, everything we're doing is to hone this application to make sure that we do not cause any detrimental impacts to the surrounding neighbors. As Scott Kelly said during our small community meeting, this is an iterative process. That's why we really appreciate these opportunities to hear these comments so that we can improve this application over time. So over time, you'll see more and more details, sound management plan, transportation plan. All of these things will help answer all of these questions in greater and greater detail.
And just to follow up on that, I will mention that as both was covered in my part of the presentation and in the Schweller's, there will be further revisions to this application in reaction to staff comments and the community's comments. So that's the purpose of this meeting, really, is to get feedback so that they can adjust their application.
All right, next I have Lisa Hogan. Lisa, please unmute yourself, state your name and address, and if you are representing a group, that as well.
Thank you, Carolyn. My husband and I live at 7200 Plank Road across the street from Scott and Nancy. I've owned this property for 13 years, Portaferry Farm. And I'm actually typing my concerns because specifically they relate to traffic on the road. And I think that much of this has been addressed, and I appreciate the questions of Mr. Mill and Yowell and the O'Briens. I share the same concerns, but I've had questions about the drainage on the road, the curves in the road, the number of wildlife in the evenings that have caused accidents. We've gone out to help our neighbors a number of times over the years with vehicle-related issues on Plank Road, and there's no lighting. So having this 7 miles in on one end and 3 miles in on another is quite different from a Pippin Hill venue, which is near a heavily populated commercial corner and has its own access road. And so I would like to hear how that's going to be addressed. It is a concern. Safety on the road is a concern.
Thank you. Do you all want to respond to that, or you want me to go on to the next person?
Would you mind talking about the county's process when it comes to transportation planning and VDOT review?
Sure, I can respond to that briefly. All special use permit applications are reviewed not only by county staff, but also by VDOT and sometimes other state agencies. And we are already in discussions with the VDOT trying to assess the impacts of this use and the capacity of the roads. And that will be part of staff's comments to the Planning Commission and the board. We haven't completed that review yet, but we always take into account not only the safety right at the entrance, which is often VDOT's concern, is the connection from a private property and a private use onto the public highway, but also we'll try to consider traffic volumes in the surrounding area as we get more information about the volume of traffic on the roads in the area. So that will definitely be addressed in the comments and recommendations to the commission and the board. And we also typically ask applicants to provide traffic generation estimates for use like this and to address traffic concerns. For example, one thing that this particular applicant has proposed is the usage of buses for the 4 larger events for the number of people over 150. That's an example of one way to address traffic concerns.
Thanks.
All right, our next person is Chris Hawk. Chris, please mute yourself, state your name and address and who you represent, and your 3 minutes starts now.
Hello, I am Chris Hawk with the Piedmont Environmental Council. PEC raises concerns related to the noise and light pollution associated with this project, especially given the applicant's request for 350 guests during 4 events per year. That request is 200 guests greater than the county's stated 150 guest maximum. Therefore, at the beginning of this special use permit request, it already does not conform to the county's stated event limits and requires a special exception to a special use permit. Additionally, the rural landscape of Albemarle County should be protected and preserved. How can the county adequately monitor and regulate light and noise pollution, especially given that many of these events, if not all of these events, will occur on weekends when county staff and police personnel are limited? Does the county have the appropriate equipment to accurately monitor noise pollution? Please consider the impact that noise and light pollution can have on residents, especially those who work in healthcare and emergency response, who have to go to sleep before 10 p.m. or have strange working hours. We plan on submitting additional comments in the future and appreciate the time this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Hawk. I just want to reiterate that the applicant will have a detailed sound management plan to ensure that, number one, every event will have someone on site to manage sound. So the applicant lives on the property, but we don't know, for every single event if the applicant will be on site. But the applicant is not going to be managing the event. Every event must have some sort of event manager, and that person will have to enforce the various factors that we'll set out in our sound management plan, which will involve either monitoring or having automatic limiting monitors on the sound equipment. I noticed one of the comments asked about whether those coming in can bring their own equipment. The answer to that is no. There will be a house sound system so that it will be consistent across events. Just want to make that clear regarding noise. And I think Kelsey addressed lights before. That's something that we'll work closely with the county to design when that time comes.
All right, next I have Andrew Bain. Andrew, please state your name, address, and if you're representing a group, or please state that as well. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Hi, this is actually Elizabeth Bain, Andrew's sister. We live at 1261 Ortman Road with our parents, Edward and Kay Bain. I'm just going to briefly read a statement that we'd written. As longtime residents of the neighborhood, we know there's no need for fancy sound or traffic studies. We actually live here. We can hear the Misty Mountain Music Festival in its entirety from its location on 250, which is 4 times as far from us as Weavertree Hall. We hear the trains crossing Afton. We hear the trains east of Route 20 running through North Garden. We hear automotive traffic on I-64, 250, 151. These aren't anomalies. These are drawn from daily soundscape of our region. The terrain of our beautiful corner of this region sends sound far farther than a silly audio study commissioned by Weavertree will show. The changing atmospheric conditions often serve to amplify sounds. Observant residents are perfectly legitimate citizen scientists. Please deny the permit. There is an ever-increasing volume of traffic on neighborhood roads, and these roads are already unsafe with daily drivers. Adding in event traffic will only exacerbate the situation. Specifically, adding buses is absurd to consider when factoring in already dangerous truck traffic on Plank. This is a residential agricultural region. We don't want or need event centers just because incomers are used to that wherever they come from. We encourage being good neighbors and stewards. The generations of stewardship that created the current environment are not for sale. Please deny the Weavertree permit application. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next I have Martha Bain. Martha, please state your name, address, and if you're representing someone else, that as well. Your time starts now.
Hello, my name is Martha Bain. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I live at 1081 Kingsway Road, directly across from the venue. I've lived here for 30 plus years. I am a second generation Western Albemarle rural dweller. Any given day, I can be in my yard working the flower bed, moving a wheelbarrow load of mulch, or sitting on a bench with a cup of tea and hear the orchestra of natural sounds. Birds chirping, squirrels bickering, hawks calling, and gentle breezes rustling leaves and grasses. After long hours of giving expert essential care to precious babies and children, at UVA Children's Hospital, where I am a certified pediatric registered nurse, I am physically, emotionally, and intellectually drained. My days at home, in my yard, with my hands in the dirt, surrounded by the gentle sounds of rural life, are restorative, my therapy, and my creative outlet. This piece is essential to my well-being. The Weavertree Hall event special use permit that has been presented will completely disrupt the tranquility of the rural living that I've enjoyed the entirety of my life. Our home's proximity to the special event and our private road, Kings Way, will remove all quiet from our home. The dust from the increased traffic flow on the gravel road will be overwhelming. The noise from traffic coming and going and from the events will disturb my sleep. I often work weekends when I am in bed at 8:45 p.m. and arise at 5 a.m. This area of Albemarle is a natural amphitheater with sounds traveling more than a mile. For example, We live more than a mile from Blue Ridge Farm and can hear the events held there. Kingsway is a private narrow gravel road, not as stated in the Weavertree narrative, that is maintained by the homeowners who use it to egress their homes. As the Kingsway Road Homeowners Group road maintenance lead and treasurer, I am well versed in what maintaining our road entails. The amount of increased traffic will overwhelm it. Just since December 2000, we have spent $162,000 to replace the bridge over Dons Creek and maintain our road for homeowner use alone. When the former owner of Weavertree used the stables to house horses, much of the barn traffic used their egress on Dick Woods Road. For riding events, horse trailers egressed from a separate and private entrance on Plank Road west of Kingsway. The current owner of Weavertree does not have a long-standing investment in our community and has paid $0 in Kingsway Road maintenance. When asked what his plans were in participating in road maintenance, no response was received and no offer has been made.
Ma'am, your time is up.
Oh, shoot. Thank you.
Sorry.
Carolyn, I'd like to respond to that last comment, which is not correct based on what happened at our small community meeting. I'd just like to bring up another slide so that people can see what Ms. Bain is referring to. So Kingsway Road is indeed a private road. And according to the declaration that was recorded by Christian Retreats, which is the declarant under that declaration, this road, if you can see this, Kingsway Road is to be maintained by the owner of the farm parcel, which is the parcel at issue here. And these surrounding parcels you can see that come off Kingsway Road and Emmaus Road and Nether Springs Road. And so all of those properties are to contribute to the maintenance of Kingsway Road. And Scott and Nancy are well aware of that and have talked with Martha Bain about this in the past and are certainly willing to contribute their share. As Scott said in our small meeting, if the special use permit were approved so that they could have these special events, he would maintain Kingsway Road up to the point of the event's venue. So that was his response in the meeting. I just want to clarify that particular fact.
All right, next I have Joan Stalzer and Wes Ferris. Remember, it might be two of you, but you have 3 minutes together. And if you'll state your name and address, and if you are representing a group. Your time starts now.
Hi there, this is Joan Stalzer, my husband Wes. So I'm at 7087 Dick Woods Road. I abut the property from the south side. We wanted to ask, first of all, it seems almost a moot point, but the decibels that were measured, what time of year was this done? It will vary greatly. One of my biggest concerns, with the leaves on the trees, that certainly plays a role. So one of our biggest concerns living here in this quiet area is the noise. I'm a physician. I work in the hospital. I do hospital medicine. I work all hours. Some shifts are at night. Some shifts are in the day. It is an extreme hardship, as the prior pediatric nurse had mentioned, coming home. Our hours aren't the same as everyone else. I didn't think that I would ever have to deal with this kind of an issue in this area. It is extremely quiet. And when we talk decibels, that it'll only be, a certain number of decibels of, say, bird chirping is very different than party laughter, non-natural noise. That is very different. So I do think that if any consideration is taken to the objectives, such as the factors of consideration, which are no substantial detriment to adjacent parcels. So if we do take that seriously, I would like that to be factored into the surrounding residents. Thank you.
Hi, this is Wes Ferris with my wife, Joan. I just wanted to restate the question maybe for the sound engineer about what time of year that these decibels were measured, because around this area, those of us that live here know that the sound carries much further when there's not as many leaves on the tree. So early spring and fall, the decibels will be, we'll hear things much louder. So also I wanted to know what time of year these activities were going to take place. If you all could address those questions. And just again, I think that even if it's not that loud, it's still not what we want to hear. We moved out here for, to be in the country and to hear nature, not to hear basically music. Thank you.
Mr. Ferris, the thought is that those events would take place in the nice seasons, spring and fall, and potentially summer, throughout the year. I would like to turn it over to Bill Yoder, the sound engineer, to answer the more specific questions that have been raised about the sound study and, whether it has whether the time of year has any impact on the sound carrying, that kind of thing. Bill, if you would.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, great. So to be clear, the sound study wasn't made with sound measurements. It was instead made with sound predictions. So the difference there is, instead of producing sound and then measuring at some distance, we can enter in the sound sources, and then using the terrain that we know is already there, we can predict what the sound levels will be at some distance. And you had asked about leaves on the trees. In this circumstance, everything inside the property boundary was modeled as if there were no trees. There were no bushes or trees or anything like that. Beyond the property boundary, because you're essentially living in the forest, I did model it as having trees. So if you do look at the sound study, just know that up into the property boundary where the noise ordinance matters, like, we're being very conservative, and we've ignored any foliage that exists or that may exist, because to your point, the seasons change. That being said, even if we didn't ignore it, the sound levels propagating to the property boundary wouldn't be significantly impacted by the foliage, because there's just not enough of it. You need forests to significantly absorb sound, and they just don't have it on their property. So I think I've answered that question. There was another one I saw in the chat earlier, though I'm not remembering what it is, that I'd love to address. Let me scroll up here. Oh wow, 135 messages. Let's just stop there. If you've got another question, I'll be happy to chime back in and try and answer that too.
Thanks, Bill. One of the issues I think that we ought to address is a very good question about, we're just talking about decibels on these slides, and we are not just looking at decibels at the property line. We're not just looking at strict compliance with the zoning ordinance, and that's a very good point. And that's why Bill looked at what is the sound at homes within 1,000 feet. We want to know what is the impact on the surrounding neighbors, just not are we in compliance with the zoning ordinance. So we are looking very carefully at that, and that's what Bill's study is doing.
All right. I have Leah Stearns, but I think, Leah, did you give up your time for Mr. Yowell earlier?
No, I did not. Thank you.
You have 3 minutes. State your name and address, and your time starts now.
Okay, my name is Leah Stearns, and I live on Ortman Road, closer to up towards the Batesville Road. And I've lived here my whole life, and I love it here. So let's see. I, of course, prepared some notes and can't find them. But I think that it's really important to note that the slide that was presented in the beginning about the county's comprehensive plan and what the criteria are for the county's review of the special permit application, I would say that, you know, this proposal as it is right now does not meet any of that criteria. It's 0 for 4. It'll be a significant detriment to the area. It'll have a negative effect on property values. It'll compromise the right to private enjoyment in our own homes. It will change the character of the area, which is a designated rural historic district. And I would argue that the context of the proposed site is arguably more significant than any contributing historic structures on the site. There will be no harmony if this is granted. I've been speaking to over 100 people who see no concept of harmony in this proposal. And finally, it's not consistent with the county's comprehensive plan, as evidenced by the need to apply for an exception to regulations preventing these commercial ventures. The applicants are effectively asking county reviewers to rezone the area on the sole basis of their idea. So if granted or permitted, this kind of activity will drive VDOT to make changes to the roads. And I'm not talking about, you know, accommodating drunk drivers. I'm talking about commercial and private vehicles. The impact of the traffic by these vehicles will have a massive negative impact on the tone and setting of the area and massively compromise the qualifying characteristics of the historic rural designation of the district. So drunk driving is a problem, sure, but sober driving and passers through may not bring the same care and responsibility and sense of community as transients through the neighborhood. Transportation and planning and application review. I know VDOT has a historic preservation officer who's communicating with them about the impact that this will have as far as transportation routes and VDOT concerns relative to the site on Ortman, on Plank, on Dickwoods West, on Dickwoods East. Traffic coming from Charlottesville, traffic coming from the Shenandoah Valley, traffic coming from south on 29. What is the critical mass, I ask, that all of us residents have to bear for this rash of commercial event proposals in our rural neighborhood, some of which exist solely for the commercial consumption of alcohol or just to have a party? So
I'm sorry, but your time is up.
Thank you.
Next, I have Ann Novak. Ann, please state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes starting now.
Hello, my name is Ann Novak. I live at 1207 Birches Creek Road. I also live in an historic home, and I rent out our cottage to people who are desperate to escape and have a weekend of quiet and night beauty. That would be pretty much destroyed by this. But beyond me, beyond my personal concerns, this is a disaster for the neighborhood. This is impacting everyone who lives within, I don't know how many miles of Weavertree. We hear the train in Crozet on Birches Creek Road. I hear a donkey up near Plank Road. The sound here is not, I'm sorry, Bill Yoder, normal. It is in a basin. We get reverberations. If it's a misty night, we can hear all sorts of stuff. And now I'm going to turn you over to my husband, Jim.
Hi. It is nothing but disingenuous to claim that this proposal would not terribly degrade the quality of life in this area. This is simply obvious. This proposal would basically destroy the quality of life currently enjoyed by the neighbors. This is not why we live here. The basic problem here is change. The applicant wants to fundamentally change the life of everyone who lives nearby against our wills. I have one question for you. If this abomination somehow does manage to pass, what is the procedure we would have to follow to have it rescinded? Because we would work on that starting immediately.
Let me just, this is Scott Kelly. Let me sort of address the question about rescinding this, but some observations about this. Look, we have looked at various alternatives for what to do with Weavertree Hall Farm now that we're the owners, and it's a residence. We're living there. This is not a a passive investment, as some have implied. And also, I just want to be very clear. We've looked. We are applying here for something that is very limited in scope and duration. We're talking about 18 events per year. So we've limited the number because we know we need a special variance. We limited the number from the 24. People have compared this to Pippin Hill and other things. Those are, in my view, just having gone there, they're restaurants. They are commercial venues. We're talking here about something that is used infrequently, and the idea that it's going.
Sorry, sir, your time is up. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong people. I'm so sorry. Keep going.
I was just going to say that these things, like it's going to destroy the quality of life. It's going to degrade all the properties. It's going to, impact Martha's gardening. Again, I would just ask everybody to focus a little bit on what we're talking about here and what we're not talking about. And what we're talking about is a special permit, a special use permit, which will allow the maintenance and the improvement of Weavertree Hall Farm. And it's very limited in its scope, and we intentionally made it that way. And I hope everybody will take that into account. Thank you.
All right, next I have Holmes. Please state your full name and address and unmute. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Yeah, hi, this is Holmes Brown. I live at 1894 Steelhouse Creek Road. I first started living here in 1956. During that time, I actually met the then owner of Weavertree Hall, Churchill Newcomb. So anyway, I go back a few years around here. One question, from your presentation, you've got 18 events. It sounds like the first 150 at all 18 events will provide their own transportation. Is that correct? Buses after that?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Brown.
Okay, so they probably won't be each person driving one car, but do the math and you've got an awful lot of cars on. I imagine the events are going to be clustered, as you said earlier, in the nice months. So you may be talking about every other weekend, several hundred cars driving through Batesville in the daytime and then leaving at midnight. Now, you can adjust your permits all you want, but I think it's undeniable that that's going to have an impact. Here in Batesville, we fought 4 years to get a restriction on big trucks on Miller School Road. We've had problems with dump trucks, cement trucks going to Crozet. So traffic problems are not a new issue for us. But I don't see how you can contend that you're not going to have an impact on the folks in Batesville. So I'll end at that point. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Brown. I'll let Kelsey speak to this in more detail, but the number of parking spaces required for 150 attendees is only 60. We'll have a few more than that. We're showing currently over 100, but we don't expect hundreds of cars for these events. Kelsey, did you want to add anything to that regarding the parking situation?
Sure, Larry. I mean, I think you covered it pretty well. The county requires one parking space per 2.5 guests. And so the assumption there for trip generation is that 2.5 guests contributes to one vehicle, up to 150 guests. And then beyond that, it would be bus trips.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, before we get our next person up, if you've already spoken once tonight, please lower your hand, as it's not fair to anybody else. You're only allowed to speak one time for 3 minutes. If you have more questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or in the chat. I don't know that we'll get to every question in the chat tonight because there's just a lot of comments going on, but I will definitely get everything that's in the chat and the Q&A to Scott and Lori and Kelsey to make sure they can answer your questions. Right now I have Oscar Ruiz. Oscar, please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes starting now. Oscar, can you hear me?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, go
Yes,
ahead.
thank you. Yes, Oscar Ruiz at 1722 Hanover Avenue in Richmond, Virginia, but with a real acute interest in one of the properties that directly abuts the applicant's parking lot. And as such, I really concerned that there would be 60 automobiles parked in that parking lot in that view shed. So I guess the first question and most overriding question I have, and I haven't heard yet, is how this application and use would actually preserve or positively add to the National Historic District the characteristics of the farm and the region, and very specifically the neighborhood that is within feet of the applicant's activities. That's one thing. Obviously, the devil is going to be in the details on the impact on the neighborhood, very specifically. That access road, Kingsway, is a very narrow road. I can't imagine having 20 cars on there at once, let alone 60 in a queue to try to park for an event. So I'd like to hear how that would be managed very specifically. Also, I heard that there's going to be valet parking. That means you're going to have people waiting to park their car. I'd like to hear how that's going to be handled. The noise and the dust that will be raised from all this added activity needs to be addressed. Essentially, I'm hearing that there's 18 events that are going to happen during the nice times of the year. That's probably the summer and the fall, and how that is not going to affect the neighbors living in that area every weekend. I'd also like to hear how these events are. We hear wedding venues, and we understand it to be a pleasant, relatively quiet activity. However, what other events could be allowed at this venue? And is this an open end? Does it start at 7 and end at 10 p.m. or is it a limit in time, 4 hours or 3 hours or something like that? So again, I'd really like to understand how this event or how this application is going to positively add to the characteristics of that historic farm and or preserve the nature of the farm district itself. We be very new neighbors here, and so don't have the history, but I can already see many issues related to this application. And with that, I will end.
Thanks, Mr. Ruiz. One of the benefits, and in fact, one of the reasons why special events were created for the rural areas was to afford people the opportunity to enjoy these historic estates. And that's Scott and Nancy's intent here. And also to help them to maintain this historic estate. As we mentioned earlier, there are 16 barns and other outbuildings, stables that need to be maintained. And so having events is a way to make sure that all of these are brought up to, current standards, keep them safe for use, and to keep them in good condition. And that's the primary purpose for their having, wanting to have these special events. Of course, the road will be maintained in such a way that it is safe for those entering the events. Scott's already committed to helping with that maintenance of Kingsway Road, and that will be looked at by the transportation planner, and will respond to those comments regarding what that surface needs to look like in response to the questions about noise and dust. And special events are not limited to weddings. They can be small parties, small gatherings. Just because you're allowed to have 150 doesn't mean that it won't be 50 events, 50 guests at one event, or 75 at another. Those are just maximum levels, just for planning purposes. I hope that's helpful.
All right, Scott, would you like to speak to the Novak's question about resending the permit? You're muted.
Okay, my apologies. Yeah, I was in the middle of typing a response, but I'll just go ahead and say it so everyone can hear it. I'm going to have to consult with our attorneys. I don't know that there is a process for rescinding a permit. Decisions of the board of supervisors, I believe, can be appealed, but I don't know what the legal process is yet. So I'll have to consult with our attorneys and respond to folks later about how exactly that works. It's not a question I've ever had before, so it's something I'll have to do a little bit of research on. I apologize for not being able to give a more clear and final answer at the moment.
All right, next I have Angela Doolin. Angela, please unmute yourself, state your name and address for the record, and your 3 minutes starts now. Angela, are you unmuted?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, okay. This is Angela Doolin. Myself and Peter Doolin live at 7451 Dick Woods Road. We own Afton Stables. And I have 3 questions to ask on behalf of our attorney, Stephen Blaine from Woods Rogers in Charlottesville. First, is there a special exception attached to this? Mr. Clark's presentation did not address this. 2, does a VDOT 527 review apply, and will a commercial entrance approval be required? And 3, if alcohol will be served, has an ABC license been applied for? Those are the 3 questions from my attorney. I just want to add a special note, which is that I completely agree with pretty much everything and every comment made by my neighbors. I do not agree with this plan at all. I have a vested interest in the area. We live on Dick Woods Road. It's a dirt road, and I have horrible visions of a lot of traffic coming up and down there, or buses idling for 4 hours while they wait for their drunk partygoers to wind their way back down here and leave the property. So in the interest of time, I will now say thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Doolin. I'll answer questions 1 and 3, and Scott Clark, I'll leave number 2 for you. As to number 1, yes, a special exception was applied for in conjunction with the special use permit. So the special use permit, as we've discussed, is for the actual use. And then because that actual use permits up to 150 guests, unless there's a special exception, we've applied for a special exception to permit up to 350 guests for up to 4 of the proposed 18 events. That's the sole purpose of that special exception. And that would have to be also, just like the special use permit, approved by the Board of Supervisors. In terms of the ABC license, the folks who would hire the space, Scott and Nancy own the property, and the property will be lent out to those who want to use the space, and those vendors will be responsible for having the necessary ABC licenses to conduct those events. So at this point, Scott has not applied for it, or the owner has not applied for an ABC license. Scott Clark, do you want to answer the question about the VDOT 527 review?
Unmute myself. All special use permits are considered by VDOT, and the response that we got from that agency this time was that the entrance that exists there now will need to get an entrance permit for the new use from VDOT. I'm currently corresponding with the VDOT to find out if any other requirements need to be met, but it appears that the entrance meets the sort of rural scale commercial entrance design requirements that they already have in place. So other than the process of getting the entrance approval when if and when this use goes to the site plan stage, then I haven't heard anything from VDOT that any other review would be required. But I am currently corresponding with them, trying to find out more details to make sure that we've addressed that completely.
Right. Next, we have Tracy Brown. Tracy, please unmute yourself, state your name and address. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Hi, can you hear? Hi.
Yes. Go ahead.
Let me mute my phone. Okay. I'm Tracy Brown, and I live at 1141 Kingsway Road with my extended family. There are 3 things that concern me. Property value. I'm concerned about the property value. Many of our homes comprise the bulk of our assets, and it's my worry that there would be detrimental impact of this venue on our value of property. I mean, honestly, who wants to live across from a party venue, or who would ever buy a home next to one? There's a private road. We've already talked about that. There's a lot of risk. I'm worried about accidents and health and safety on that road. And public nuisance. We've all been to weddings. Not everyone behaves. There is no public need for this project, nor does it provide a benefit to the public. It especially does not provide a benefit to Kingsway neighbors. It does not support an agricultural rural economy. It is a commercial venture only. That's
Thank
it.
you for your, thank you. Next, I have Donna, who says this is her husband. Please state your name and address, and your 3 minutes starts now.
Okay, my name is Kill Sylvester. I live in Crozet. I have two comments and a question. The first comment is perhaps you don't care about anecdotal data reducing real estate in your area. Just in the last month on learning about all this. Though I live locally, a more rural landowner is of high interest.
Oh, I'm sorry, your voice is breaking up. Could you?
Neighborhood is of much, much less interest unless someone's going to sell for pennies on the dollar. Point number 2, Lori, can you hear me clearly? Okay.
You're breaking up, yeah.
Point number 2, the applicants referred earlier. Okay, the applicants referred earlier to making their estates available to the public, or in a really historical sense. The entire plan that Lori talked about, she really emphasized the horse ring was going to be the center of the operation. The historic home is behind lovely boxwoods, lovely trees, out of public view. a ring of crushed gravel where horses used to walk around is not public enjoyment of the historic home. I don't resent you not wanting people in your home, but they are very different things. And thirdly, question for Bill Yoder. The sound assumptions I can appreciate modeling from my line of work, but at what elevation are all of those boundary lines of your decibel levels? Elevation matters for where all those lines begin and colors transition. So, and that's the end of my time.
Thank you.
Bill, did you want to respond to that second question about your study?
Yes. So what your question as to what elevation are the boundary lines at? They're at the exact elevation that the boundary lines are at. So I don't recall this exact moment, but I want to say 750 feet. But you know, that's something we can certainly answer if you're interested. But I think just know that the model that was built was used using the topographic lines that represent the actual site. And so I hope that answers your question.
All right, the next person is Glenn Jones. Glenn, please unmute yourself, state your name and address for the record, and your 3 minutes starts now.
My name is Glenn Jones. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I live with my partner at 7441 Plank Road. Our home is bounded on two sides by Weavertree Home Farm. We believe strongly that an event space will be disruptive and irrevocably alter the character of our community. We are particularly concerned with the issues of noise and the potential loss of property value. The application anticipates noise levels within limits specified by county ordinance. However, it seems to be ignored that noise within these limits can still be a nuisance, detrimental effect on the quality of life of people living nearby. Our objection is not just that the noise may be too loud, it's that it could be continuous for hours on end and uncontrollable. I think about sitting on a plane for a cross-country flight next to someone on a telephone who won't stop talking. It's not just the volume of the call that offends, it's the continuous, intrusive, and inescapable nature of the activity. That kind of disruption makes it virtually impossible to peaceably engage in any number of pursuits. From inside our home, we can clearly hear the music from occasional outdoor events at Blue Ridge Farm. And there's a lot of space between our homes and these events and a lot of trees and shrubs to block the sound. We're much closer to Weavertree, and there is no buffer between our house and the event space except for space. We can hear car radios and loud conversations at the farm when we're on our back porch. We can only imagine at this point what 6 hours of amplified music and crowd noise several times a month would be like. And many of our neighbors are much closer to the proposed event space. This does not bode well for peaceful coexistence. Events at Weavertree and the resulting noise could crowd out and disrupt private events in the neighborhood during much of the spring and fall. The applicant is requesting the right to host 18 events per year. Given the popularity of barn weddings, it's not unreasonable to expect multiple weddings virtually every weekend during the most popular months like May and October. Like many of our neighbors, we spend a lot of time outdoors, and especially on weekends, and an event space next door will surely affect our ability to do so peaceably. Noise pollution can materially hurt the value of real estate. Arguably, an event space next door would do just that. Potential home buyers coming to areas like ours are attracted by the prospect of enjoying the pleasures of country life in an idyllic and tranquil setting. The pursuit of a home in an area like ours is a rejection of all the noise in the city. Attending a party is one thing, but living next door to one is quite another. For some potential buyers, an event space next door will be
Sorry, so your time is up.
a deal killer. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I don't have anybody else with their hand up. I'm going to go to the Q&A. Okay, 1 second. have somebody that just raised their hand, Jeff and Elizabeth Bowman. Please state your name and address. You have 3 minutes to speak. Please unmute yourself now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me squeeze in. My name is Jeff Bowman. I'm sitting here with my wife, Elizabeth Bowman. We live at 1121 Kingsway Road. And I want to start by saying a good deal of what I would say. I had the privilege of sitting in Scott and Nancy's living room and to, say, hi, Scott. I said it, told you I'd see you on the 30th. And I appreciate the rapport, the informal discussion that we had. And I hope that as your neighbor, Scott, that I'll be able, that you and I together would be able to continue enjoying that. If I walk out the front to the front deck of my house, the entrance to the venue is 150 yards from my deck. The venue itself, the riding rink, is something like 300 yards, right at eye level. I go out, I sit down after a long day, I raise my head. I've got the best front row seat of whatever it is that's going to be going on there. I was looking at the contour maps, the sound contour maps. My house sits on the border of the 55 decibel contour of your most aggressive study. Statement of fact, my quality of life will be severely negatively affected. I'm just saying that, okay? A thought, no, I've not gone out and studied this, but this venue has got a significant number of houses very close to it on Kingsway Road. We heard from the Carpenters, and Clark Adams is right across from us. I'm not sure that any other venue has quite the private houses on a private road quite so close to the proposed center as the one that's proposed here. That would be an interesting study, Mr. Clark, to really look at that particular aspect of it. I want to squeeze in one more thing real quick. Lori, you just read something about the ownership of the road, or who is responsible for maintaining the road. I think that your reading was wrong. I don't have my covenant restrictions, and I share with Scott and Nancy. I've been on this road for over 20 years. The road has been owned. By the way, this private road, I co-own it. You're proposing doing this on a road I own, okay? And it has been maintained by all of the landowners on this road from one end to the other. That has been the reality. And whoever cares about this part, I think that another careful rereading of those covenant restrictions to find out really who
Sorry,
is
sir.
responsible.
Your time is up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's see, I have a couple more hands now. Pam and Charlie Fitzgerald. Please unmute yourself, state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes starting now.
I'm Pam Fitzgerald. Charlie and I live at 8100 Batesville Road. In the first place, I'd like to welcome the Sanfords to the neighborhood. They've chosen a special place to live. It's a beautiful community, one that we treasure, and we're doing all that we can to preserve and protect. In fact, many children, including our daughter, have learned to ride at Weavertree and neighboring farms. We believe that those kinds of enterprises, by all measures, were entirely appropriate to the property, and they were conducted without any disruption to the neighborhood. We respect the Sanfords' wish to monetize their investment, but we do have several concerns. Our property, in addition to several around us, is in conservation easement with the county. We voluntarily entered into this restrictive agreement because we're committed to preserving all dimensions of the rural nature of the community. The problem is that the county approves these projects that breach the spirit, if not the letter, of the easement, and they're always presented uniquely, and the cumulative impact is never really considered. There are a couple issues that I'd like to address. I think roadways has been covered. I do want to talk about water, the fact that this part of the county sits on a large aquifer. It's fed by mountain springs. It's integral to the flow of Stockman, Mormon, Meachams, and ultimately the reservoir and the county water supply. We have now breweries, wineries, which consume a great deal of water, and an event venue such as that proposed, even if the land perks adequately, it will consume an inordinate amount of a very precious resource. I have a comment about the parking lot. I'm assuming that the proposal is for a permeable surface. That would be in keeping with easement restrictions. Reinforcing what was said about sound, I can tell you that on certain days when the wind's blowing the right way, we can hear the raceway in Waynesboro. That's how far sound travels in these mountains. And the last thing I'd like to say is that the lighting issue is a serious one, and there doesn't seem to be any assurance that the proposed activity will really conform to the county's dark skies ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next I have.
Sorry, if I may just respond to follow up on the water use. There's in water usage, there's consumptive and non-consumptive uses. Consumptive uses are where you're using water and it's actually leaving the watershed. So vineyard, wineries, breweries, they could be pulling groundwater, bottling it, and it then leaves the watershed. In this instance, it would be a non-consumptive use. All water taken from the site will be returned. And so I just wanted to follow up with some additional information about the nature of this water use proposed on this property.
And just to follow up on the question about lighting, since that's come up a few times, we typically, when an event permit or similar use goes to the Board of Supervisors for consideration, we would always have several conditions of approval recommended. In other words, terms for the permit that limit it to a certain number of people, a certain scale of operation, hours of operation, things like that. One of those recommended conditions is normally that all new lighting for the use be full cutoff lighting. In other words, full cutoff lighting is lighting that puts the light source up into the light fixture far enough that the light only goes down and not sideways or up. So to address the question about the dark sky policy, that's how we typically try to approach that with various kinds of permits in the rural areas.
All right. Let's see. Next I have Liza Scallett. Liza, please state your name and address. Your 3 minutes starts now. Please unmute.
I am unmuted. My name is Eliza Bowers Scallett. I live at 1138 Kingsway Road. The very first communication we received from Scott Kelly and Nancy Fansford was through their lawyer. They moved into the neighborhood, they said, and they told us what they wanted to do as a wedding venue. I wrote a letter to them, talking to them about the fact that I hope that once they moved to this area and began living in this house, that they would fall in love with the property and they would respect the rural nature and the incredible bucolic environment in which we live. They did not move to the area. My understanding is that they now are in residence. We are glad that they're here in the home. I still, idealist that I am, want to believe that they too will fall in love with this beautiful property and respect it in the way that it deserves to be respected. My fear is that they are not intending that because the adversarial relationship they set up by sending their first communication to us through their lawyer makes it very clear that they have every intention of moving forward with these plans, no matter what anyone feels about them. The neighbors who surround them have lived here for many years. My house was built 33 years ago. I'm concerned about the fact that the language they use is often contrary to the facts. They talked about taking down all these dead trees that had to be removed at the great expense to them. My understanding is that basically one tree was dead. They then justified it by saying that the trees were blocking the flow of the stream. I talked to an arborist who said trees in fact are healthy for streams. We know that the property was the trees were taken down so they have a better view of the mountains. Fine. Those trees belonged on their property. It was their right to take them down. But the fact that they disguise the truth behind their intentions is very disturbing to me. When we brought up the fact that we were all on wells, they acted like they were surprised by that information. I'm just so concerned that this area that so many people have lived in and loved and respected for so many years is being treated so cavalierly. And I thought perhaps they just were not aware of what would take to do a wedding venue. And then someone said to me, oh, they're just interested in the tax write-off. That's all they care about. It's truly a business venture. And as everyone else has said, there doesn't seem to be any benefit in it to anyone else in the neighborhood. And to cap it off, when they were given an offer because they pleaded poverty, that they have to do this and able to be able to afford this property. And when they said that, somebody did volunteer to buy the property back from them, to preserve it, to keep
sorry,
it
ma'am,
the
your
way it had
time
been.
is up.
And they said no, they would not sell the property at the
Ma'am,
cost
your
at
time
which they
is
bought
up.
it.
I'd like to respond and give Scott and Nancy a chance to respond to some of these allegations of untruthfulness, which I think are actually uncalled for here. First of all, let me just correct the record, especially for Supervisor Palmer and Commissioner Firehawk, that the first communication from Nancy and Scott was a personal communication from Nancy and Scott. It was not from me. I just want to make that clear. And they sent that to roughly 50 of the closest neighbors to reach out and open up a dialogue, to start hearing back, start explaining what they were thinking about. And of course that, there's nothing that requires them to do that. They did that in the spirit of being a good neighbor. So just want to correct the record on that point. And then, allegations of untruthfulness about other things, I'll give Scott and Nancy a chance to respond to that. I don't want to let that stand without a response.
Yeah, again, the idea that we pleaded poverty is not true. We love this place and we're going to stay here. And again, we've got a large farm and we're trying to figure out what to do with the farm that's consistent with the preserving the nature of the property. Again, as I think you know from all these submissions, we're talking about doing very little to the exterior of any of the existing buildings. In fact, trying to improve the one that's by, I think, everybody's estimation, sort of an eyesore, which is the indoor riding ring. But Liza, we have tried to be very open about this. Yes, did we hire a lawyer to help us navigate through these various permits and approvals that we needed? Yes, we did, because we didn't know anything about it. And frankly, without Lori's help, we wouldn't have been able to navigate through and have these kinds of conversations. We also hired Lori because I think she's an undyingly pleasant person, and somebody who I thought would be very good at coming to a resolution here, which is acceptable to the neighbors and to the relevant government entities. So this idea that somehow we've been disingenuous, that we've been hiding things is offensive. It's wrong. You can have an arborist. I had an arborist. They said, cut down the junk trees that are clogging the pond. I'm not going to get into all the details, but we took out dead trees and we took out trees that were junk trees that were clogging up the pond and the river and that sort of thing. Maybe your person who wasn't on the site, who you had a casual conversation with, had something else to say. I followed the advice of the people that were knowledgeable about the specifics. So look, we are we are applying for a special use permit. It is for 18, maximum of 18 events a year. We've tried to engage soil experts, water experts, sound experts, Lori and the legal side. We've tried to do everything right. We've tried to send letters to the neighbors telling them what our idea was. We had a letter, a session a couple weeks ago that we were limited to 20 people, in order to, answer some additional questions. We've tried to be as transparent as we can be, and as open as we can be in this process, which is, I will admit, complicated. So, again, we appreciate the comments. I think anything that indicates that we've been dishonest or malintended is not right, and is offensive. But I hear some of these comments, and we'll take them into account.
Do we have anybody else with a raised hand here, Carolyn, or do we need to move on to the Q&A box?
We do not have anybody else with a raised hand. Unless there's something, I can read some of the questions. Some of them are just comments, which I will just send to you, Scott. The question from the Q&A in the chat box, as I've looked at it, there are a few questions in there, but I think they're pretty much very similar to what they've already had. So I'm gonna read these, and then, as I said before, all the questions from the chat and the Q&A will go to Scott and Lori. I moved over Commissioner Firehawk and Supervisor Palmer, unless in case they needed to add anything, wanted to add anything, or had any comments. The first question that came through on the Q&A is, why are the hatched areas on the map for the event structures different from the existing structures if there will be no change to the footprints?
I can answer that. So the hatched areas, we were showing proposed areas for outdoor gathering, and then the building footprints will remain the same. The hatched was just to show where people may be gathering outside of the existing structures.
The next question is from Lisa Hogan, and it was, when the owners reached out to the neighbors earlier this year, what was their response?
Sorry, we had a number of responses to the initial outreach letter. Nancy received emails and letters and maybe phone calls, and had ongoing conversations, individual parallel conversations with lots and lots of different neighbors, more than we could cover in this meeting. And I think the concerns that have been expressed tonight were some of the questions and concerns that were raised and that have been discussed over the course of the past several months.
The next question is from Carrie Brown. How is this plan in any way consistent with Chapter 18, Section 33.40 for a rural environment? It's dance, music, and partying.
I can take that one. If I remember my section numbers properly, which I may not, I believe that's a reference to the zoning ordinance section on the standards for special use permit approval. We have not made any determinations either way about comprehensive plan compliance or the other review criteria yet. Those will be reported on to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors once the application is complete. It's not complete yet because we're gathering everyone's input, we're gathering staff input, and the applicants are going to revise their application. So it's premature to make a final judgment about how those criteria are met or are not met. But we will certainly respond to that in detail in the reports to the Commission and the Board.
All right. The next question is from Matt Shadell. We are concerned about the potential noise on school nights. Will any events be held on Sundays?
That's not something that we've actually determined at this point. Nancy, if you have anything you want to add on that, I think it will depend on what people desire, who want to use the space. And as Scott mentioned earlier, as we work through the process, there's always the opportunity to think about various conditions that might be appropriate. So that's one thing that could be considered.
That's exactly right.
All right, the next question is from Leah Stearns. What is the criteria that determines or defines primary residence?
I'll try to take that as best I can. I'm not sure that our zoning ordinance actually defines primary residence. We just treat buildings as dwelling units or not dwelling units. Clearly, you know, a property like this has one large house and a couple of smaller ones. Those tend to be treated by their owners as primary or secondary, but as far as the zoning ordinance is concerned, a dwelling is a dwelling. If there's a follow-up to that helps me explain further, I'll be happy to try to do that.
That was it. There might be one down below. The next question is from Joey Toombs. Will events be required to coordinate with all other events contributing to traffic on these roads that everyone seems to be applying for? Or will every potential site be allowed to contribute hundreds of cars, decibels of music, light pollution, etc., to the whole rural area?
Yeah, again, I'll try to take this. Each application is analyzed on its own merits and its own impacts to its immediate surroundings. As a few people have mentioned, that leaves out the question of cumulative impacts. I think for the county to consider cumulative impacts of this or any other use, we would have to be looking at a research project that looked toward whether or not we wanted to modify the zoning ordinance and what's permitted. In general, though, each permit is evaluated on its own merits. If we knew that there was, I'm trying to think of a more straightforward example. If you knew you were locating a school next to a factory and they both let out at the same time, then you'd have an issue with traffic volume or something like that. So if in doing the research for the review, we find there's a direct and conflicting use, then we can try to deal with that.
Okay, next question is for Lori. This is from Leah Stearns. Lori, at one point in speaking earlier, I thought you said there would be no outdoor music after dark, but this doesn't just stated 10 p.m. stop time.
Ms. Stearns, what I stated that there would be no outdoor music during nighttime hours as defined by the county zoning ordinance. And so that means 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Right. I have more of a statement by an anonymous attendee, so I'll read it, and then if there's somebody that wants to comment. I'm interested in the applicant's stated compliance with the comp plan, when in fact it is not meeting the intent of the comp plan. The applicant refers or references strategy 3A, promoted reuse of historic structures that support agricultural and forestal uses in rural areas, but events are not an ag or forest use. Additionally, strategy 1F in the comp plan is study ways in which the county can better support the local horse industry. This proposal moves away from the horse industry and into the wedding industry. Allowing this SUP could could set a precedent for events that are not tied to an ag or forestal use and increasingly be detrimental to rural areas.
Okay, that I think we can take that in as feedback. I'm not sure there's a question there really to answer. I will say that comprehensive plan compliance obviously is a very major factor in staff's recommendations, and the commission and board's decisions on any special use permit. So it is not an issue that we will lose track of.
All right, I have two more questions from Joey. The first one is, what is the agricultural business on the site and the LLC? And if the owners don't value any of the goals of the Albemarle rural area, why did they buy this property?
I should clarify, again, I think Scott did a good job of explaining this at the beginning of the presentation. Though Nancy and Scott do have hay on the property and do lease the property for a farmer to cut hay, this is not an agritourism use or agricultural use. We're looking at special events, which is a different use, permitted in the rural area only by special use permit. So it does require Planning Commission review and Board of Supervisor approval. Even though there is agricultural use on the property, that's not required for this particular use if it has a primary use.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple more questions from Anonymous. Will the remodeling of the current structure add any heights to any of those current structures? Also, will any towers, large antennas, or tall structures be built on the property? Is it possible to get a border map of the sound study, a broader map of the sound study, i.e. zoom out more to see a larger area?
The sound study does include a broader map. I just didn't want to include too many maps in my presentation. But for each one that I showed, it does have a zoom out so you can see a much broader area. And we will be resubmitting that in our resubmission with the updated data, including the superimposition of the residences around there. So the answer to that is yes. In terms of the heights, no towers or taller structures are proposed. Scott and Nancy are working with their architect right now on how they will modify the exterior of the riding ring, and it will look the same, but it will have a different skin and windows. So to my knowledge, it won't be taller. But Scott, correct me if I'm wrong about that, or if you even know that answer to that question.
No, the intention is not to have it taller. We're trying, the intention is to work within the existing frame of the building and just improve it both aesthetically and functionally.
Okay, the next question is from Leah Stern. This is for Scott, Liz, and Karen. How can the community best help the county understand our concerns? And can you talk about the weight that may hopefully have in the review process and your recommendation to the BOS? And thanks for your help.
Well, I'll take that one for now. I'll go ahead and put my email address again in the chat box in just a moment. Anyone's welcome to provide comment to me at any time as this review goes on. Supervisor Palmer and Commissioner Firehawk also have their email addresses on the county website, so you can contact them. Any of those methods are welcome. And although we have asked that people try to provide comment in response to this meeting by December 15th, again, that's not a hard cutoff in your opportunity to participate and have your voice heard. Everyone's able and welcome to come to the public hearings once those are scheduled. And as long as this review is going on, you're always welcome to contact me. That's the easiest way to get the information to everyone who needs it. The reason we asked for the responses by early December was that was the best way to get the updates to the applicants so that they can consider changing their application, or revising their application before they submit later in December.
Ms. Firehawk or Ms. Palmer, would either of you like to speak?
I would, thank you. And thank you, Carolyn, for moving Karen and I over. Scott, you said that the applicant will finish the application in the summer. Are you talking about next summer?
No, I'm sorry, I said December.
Oh, December. It
We'll
sounded.
be resubmitting in December.
Okay. I do want, I want to say a couple quick things for all the people who have commented tonight and in the chat group. And it's really, really good for us to hear from you. It means a lot. The Batesville community has been a very, very active community. I've spent an awful lot of time in Batesville over the last several years because it has been death by 1,000 cuts with the traffic and a lot of other issues over the last 10 to 15 years. It's really been substantial. I and Karen certainly recognize that when it does come to the Planning Commission, it is going to be it's going to change from now. As Scott has explained, this is a process. And so we hope that you will continue to comment and listen to the Planning Commission meeting for what comes of that meeting. Follow that. I'm sure that the Batesville newsletter that Holmes Brown sends out and the neighborhood is organizing will keep you up to date on that. And you can certainly always email me or Karen, and the Planning Commission will hear this, make their recommendation. Of course, staff's going to make their recommendation. Then the Planning Commission will act on that, make their recommendation, and it'll come to the board. So each of these steps is important to see how it changes. And when it comes to the Board of Supervisors, you can then be emailing Scott, or you can be emailing the entire board. I put that address, bos@albemarle.org, which would be important when it gets farther along and the application is more complete and goes to the Planning Commission. So that's what I would say. And again, thank you. You've got a really wonderful community, and I don't blame you for being upset and involved. So thank you.
I'll just be really brief because I think Liz said it all, but we have been on this panel in this meeting the entire time since it started. We just recently got promoted, so you can see our face, but we've been listening. We've read all of the chats. I will read every email that is sent to me about this, and I usually always try to acknowledge that I've read your email, or if you have a specific question, I try to answer it. And I consider all of the comments that I receive when I deliberate on what to recommend to the Board of Supervisors. The entire Planning Commission will consider this, and our advice, like I said, is a recommendation, and then the Board of Supervisors makes the final decision. The application may change. I don't know if it will, but the idea is to have comments from the community, and then the applicants can consider those and then work further on their application and try to address some of the concerns they heard. And then also all of the comments that we are hearing tonight will also be shared with the Planning Commission. Scott will report on what happened at the CAC. And then if there's something I think you missed, I'll chime in too. But, you know, I live in the rural area too, and a very, very rural parcel myself. And I appreciate the importance of quietness in the countryside. But I do want to say that I do not make up my mind until I sit on the dais and I've received all the documents. The comprehensive plan and its intentions for the rural area is a key part of the deliberations. Your concerns and comments, your knowledge of the local area also key. So we are listening. And just to be clear, some of the comments have sort of insinuated that, you know, like we chose to have this application. It is our job to receive applications and review them. I don't get to cherry pick which ones I'd like to review. I review all of them. So I'm looking forward to having the staff report and a more thorough analysis. But thank you for letting me just say hello. And my name is Karen Farharkin. My cell phone is on the county's website. So thanks.
As is my cell phone. And one more comment. Karen and I have both visited to the site. And so we are familiar with the situation, what it looks like. And I'll stop there.
All right, our next question is from Maggie Morse. What are the factors that the upcoming Agricultural and Forestal District Advisory Committee meeting take into account?
The Agricultural and Forestal District Advisory Committee is a citizen committee appointed by the Board of Supervisors that oversees activity affecting the districts, which are voluntary conservation districts in the county. Anytime we have a special use permit or a rezoning adjacent to one of those districts, we are required by our county code to consider the impacts of the proposed use on that district. So the committee's job is to fairly narrowly comment on if and how a proposed use would impact agriculture, forestry, and or conservation in those districts. They don't address the other impacts like traffic or noise or something like that, unless it's of an impact to agriculture in the area. So they have a fairly narrow review. That review is advisory and would be passed on to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors for their consideration when they're making their decisions.
Okay, the next question is from Carrington Alvarez. No one can seriously dispute the property value of the individual homes on Kingsway will be disseminated by the development of an event space. No one will want to buy a rural house in this area, directly adjacent to a wedding event center where bands are being hosted outdoors. Will the Planning Commission and the county consider the individual financial impact on each homeowner, including those whose house values will be decreased by the increased traffic? Is that more of just a comment, maybe?
That's what's more of a comment, but I will say that detriment to adjacent properties it can include property value. It often includes quality of life issues like noise and light and things like that. But certainly that's something that commonly comes up in these reviews is impacts on property value.
Okay. Next question is from Tom Herliffy. Everyone tonight has expressed major concerns. I have not heard anyone except the owners say it's a good idea. So for the county reps, the one slide showed why the county would approve this to enhance visitor experience. What about residents? How much weight is given to the residents?
Again, I can take that, but to follow up, especially on what Supervisor Palmer said, residents' input is a very important part of every special use permit review. You have several opportunities to make your position known or your concerns known tonight, during the rest of the review process, and at both public hearings. So it is an important factor, and please continue to make your input.
Anonymous has two more questions. One, I don't think, I'm going to share with Scott and he can answer that one privately. But the second one was, Scott stated to me that he intended to live here half the year. Will they be here for all their intended events?
We don't know at this point in time. I mean, there's no way to answer that question. I don't know.
Because we don't, I just did want to say that one thing that we are very much committed to and that we told the neighbors and have said repeatedly is that there will be a manager on site. These will not be unsupervised events. Our intention is to spend at least half the year, if not more, at this beautiful home. So we are not, these are not, they will not be unsupervised events. Security, managerial oversight for every single event.
I have no more questions in the Q&A, and the comments in the chat box, Scott, I really think should be shared with you and you know, people have your email address. I put it in here several times. They can go to tonight's event on the county calendar, which even though tomorrow is December, you can go back to November, click on that, and Scott's email address is there as well.
Yeah, please, anyone who has a question that's in the chat but did get answered during the hand-raising discussion or during the Q&A box, please feel free to email me. Again, it's sclark@albemarle.org. There are some unanswered questions, I think, among the comments and responses to other speakers, but it's going to be difficult to pull those out. We're already quite a time into this meeting.
There is one here that I think is important because I know the answer to this one, but I want you all to tell them. They wanted to make sure that everyone will be informed at all the stages of the application, which I know for a fact that it is, their legal ad goes out, it's in the paper, it's on our website as it moves through from this process forward. Scott, if you want to go further into detail.
Yeah, and again, I was kind of partway through a typed response to that, but just for everyone's benefit. The Planning Commission public hearing will have a mandatory mailing to the adjacent property owners. Of course, that doesn't reach everyone who is interested in this. There are a lot more people beyond just that immediate row of adjacent owners. Again, anyone is free to comment and email me at any time. I don't have a specific method to offer at the moment, but I will look into ways that we can notify people as the review goes on, since there is so much interest. But at any time, feel free to check the county calendar and check in with me. And again, I don't expect this item to go to a public hearing immediately. We've got the Ag 4 District Committee meeting that I believe is going to be in late January. I'm trying to tie that down now. So that gives you a rough idea of if that has to happen before the public hearings. We have a space of time here where the applicants are going to revise their application. And we are going to go to the Ag 4 committee, so there's plenty of time to write to me with your input, and I'll be happy to respond on process steps and the timing of the dates. And I'll try to find some ways to reach those who have like newsletter links and all that to the Batesville community and see if we can also disseminate the information that way.
May I just add one thing? Folks can sign up for A-mail, and our county website has been improved dramatically. We have a news site and we're making improvements all the time, but A-mail, if you sign up for A-mail, you will get notices of when the Planning Commission meetings are and what's on those Planning Commission meetings. You can also, and they'll also send you the BOS meetings with agenda items or a link to find the agenda items. So I would suggest that's another way besides Nextdoor and Holmes Brown's email list and all the other email lists that are in the Batesville community that I know are active. Thank you. Can I ask a question? Is that okay? Carolyn, are you done with the public's questions?
No, ma'am, you're more than welcome. Go ahead.
I was surprised on the question about the ABC license. The vendors, I'm used to a lot of these venues having their own ABC license. So I guess this is either for Lori or Scott and Nancy. This is going to be, the vendors will have their own ABC license. Do you have any list of vendors that you plan on using, or is that just come much, much later in this process? That's a new one for me. You're muted, Lori.
Yeah, you're muted. Yeah.
Thanks. I don't want to interrupt you, Scott, Nancy, but I'm going to look further into the ABC license question and get back to you about that. In terms of specific vendors, I think we're far too premature to have an answer to that question. Just, I think that's all I can say about that at this point.
Yeah, and I would just say, our concept here, just to be clear, we're not talking about opening, we're not in this permitting process because we're talking about opening a vineyard and an associated winery. We wouldn't have to go through all this if that's what we were doing, and having up to 150 people and having it open, there up to 200 people and having it open daily. That's not what we want to do. And I think that's the reason you need an ABC license. We would not be directly, kind of selling alcohol as we would if we planted the fields and harvested the grapes and made the wine and turned it into a commercial winery. That's not the intention here.
Also, someone asked if the chat would be available for download. If you would I just put my email in the chat box. If you email me once I get it downloaded in a format that is easily readable, I will gladly email that to whoever would like to see it. The recording will definitely be on the county's YouTube station, YouTube channel tomorrow morning by 8:30. Be patient if it's not till 9. It just depends on how quickly it downloads as to how quickly I can get it up on the website. But it will definitely be there, I hope, by 9 o'clock tomorrow.
All right. Do we have any other questions or concerns? Anybody else? Let's see if we need more raised hands.
No.
Alrighty. Well, I think we can probably finish this off by saying, again, there's plenty of information in the chat window and online about how to reach us here at the county and provide your input. I'm just now about to type my physical mailing address into the box for people who don't have email or chat access, as that was requested. As Carolyn said, the meeting recording will be up tomorrow morning for those who missed part of it or even all of it. And I think we just cut it off by saying thank you all for everyone who attended and providing your input into this process. Feel free to let us know if you have further questions or need more information.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Carolyn.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Thank you, Carolyn, for your support. We appreciate everybody's input. And we don't appear to have any other questions in the box, so I think we can end the meeting here. And thank you all for taking the time to participate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, everybody.